Good day, good day. Welcome to Fresh Manna Ministries, Daily Fresh Manna, Grace Explained Part 5. We are following the blood of the Lamb of God. We find in the Word of God that the Ark of the Covenant, the chest that it contained 2 stone tablets, which were the 10 Commandments, was the most sacred object in the tabernacle. We find that it was in a place called the Holy of Holies. You see, the tabernacle was set in 3 dimensions. We have the outer court, the inner court, and the Holy of Holies. The outer court is where we had the altar for sacrifices to be made, and we also had the laver where the priests would clean their hands before they went into the inner court. Inside of the inner court, we find that there was the table of showbread. The table of showbread was a table of 12 loaves of bread, one for each tribe of Israel. We find that on that table also there was frankincense, and this had to be next to each loaf, and it symbolized the consecration of God's people. The consecration of God's people on this table of showbread, and then that was made of pure gold. Everything that was inside the inner court was made of pure gold. You find that the other item that was also on this table, there's a table, and a table of which God commanded that a whole place setting would be placed in gold. A plate, he said he wanted all of the pitchers and the pouring cups and everything to be on this table. Also on that table there was a complete setting. Now this setting was right in the front of the showbread table, so that you have the and it was to be also put on a blue cloth. Now we find that this table of showbread, as I said, it represented the tribes of Israel, and we find that this bread was changed out once a week. It had to be fresh bread, so it was changed out every 7 days. We find that the each loaf, as I said, represented the children of Israel. Each tribe was accounted for, and the fact that they were separated, they were set apart for God's use and purpose. We find that also in this inner court, which is also what's called the holy place, there was a lamp, a lampstand, and on this lampstand there were 7 candles, which always had to be kept burning, and they kept it burning with oil. Each of these 7 candles represented the churches, the 7 churches. We also find that that long stem that the lampstand stood on represented Christ, because he said he is the vine and we are the branches. So this was in the holy place. Also, the third thing that was in the holy place was the altar of incense. Now this altar of incense had to be directly in front of the curtain, of which behind that curtain was the Holy of Holies place where the Ark of the Covenant was. And this incense had to be burning at all times, especially when they went in. They had to have the incense burning before the Lord, because this altar represents the prayers of the people. And so we find that once a year, inside there was behind this curtain sat what is called the Holy of Holies. So this was the 3rd dimension, which is the most holy place. The most holy place. In this most holy place, you find that there was the Ark of the Covenant. And the Ark of the Covenant held within it the 10 Commandments that was written on 2 tablets. We find that also inside of the Ark of the Covenant was a jar of manna, and this was to be there, and it was to be a representation of how God fed his people in their wilderness experience from heaven. This is how they were fed every day over 40 years. God would bring down food from heaven for them. It was called manna. Manna, food from heaven. We find that also inside of the Ark of the Covenant, God commanded that Aaron's rod would be there. This was a rod that was almond flowers would be blossoming on it, even though that this rod did not have any roots to it. It was not in any dirt, but it was a rod that represented the miracles that were done for the people of God when they were in their wilderness experience. We find that on the Ark of the Covenant, on the top, the lid of the Ark of the Covenant was called the mercy seat. And the mercy seat is the place where God's presence dwells. And we find that all this was in gold. We find that the 2 cherubims were sitting on each end of the mercy seat. And it was said that God dwelt in the middle there. This was all made of pure gold, and it was the mercy seat. And so therefore, only one time a year, the priest would come in once a year, and with the blood of a lamb without a spot or a wrinkle, and this would be for the atonement of the people's sins. So this is when he was allowed to go behind the curtain. He always had bells on, because if by any chance that he did not remember that he was not only offering up an offering for other people's sins, but also for himself and his family. So if he did not offer up his offering of sins for himself and ask God for forgiveness before he sprinkled this blood onto the Ark of the Covenant, then he did not come out alive, and he would die, and they would no longer hear the bells trickling inside of inside of the holy place. And so they knew at that point that he had died because he had messed up. And so we want to know the most important part here is that this is the place of the mercy seat. And when this priest went in once a year for the atonement, which was an audience given by God, we find that he sprinkled the blood of this lamb onto the mercy seat 7 times for the forgiveness of the sins of the people, for the forgiveness of his own sins, of his family sins. This was the place where there was mercy. Mercy was found. Mercy was found here. And we find that during this time, this was the only way that people had forgiveness of their sins. We find that in this illustration, what does this message tell us? It tells us that in this ordinance that is given, that only the blood of the Lamb was able to forgive the sins of the people and of the priest himself. Only the blood would remove the sins from the people. We find that, and when we look back, we want to go back as we went in our beginning, and when we were doing Grace Explained. We looked at the fact that in Grace Explained Part 1, when we started with Adam and Eve, we find that God himself killed 2 animals, and their blood and made coats out of their skins, which was blood. And he covered Adam and Eve from their nakedness, because the only way to be covered from sin was through the blood. We find that when we look further and we went into our next part, we went into Grace Explained part 2, and we find that Isaac was going to be sacrificed by his father, because this is what God told Abraham to do, to go sacrifice his son. But we find that the Lord provided a scapegoat. We find that as Moses went to raise the knife to offer his son as God had told him in obedience, we find that God said, no, don't touch him. Don't touch him. Look over there. And there, over on the side, was a ram that was caught in the thicket by his horns. And so, therefore, Abraham was able to slice that lamb's neck, that ram's neck, and that blood was used as the sacrifice instead of his son. We find that when we got to part 3, and we talked about Grace Explained, and we talked about how when the children of were in bondage in Egypt, and we find that God told them to cover that this night I'm going to bring you out of bondage. I'm going to bring you out of your captivity. I'm going to bring you into a place where you're going to be free from your slave masters. And I'm going to bring you out after 430 years. I'm going to bring you out. And what did he do? He told the people to get the lamb, to slaughter a lamb, and to be ready to move out that night. But that before you go, you take the blood of that lamb when you kill it, and you put the blood over the mantle of your home and on the doorposts of your home. And you see, he said, when I see the blood tonight, I'm going to come through. The death angel is going to come through tonight. But you don't have to worry, because when I see the blood, I will pass over you. When I see the blood, I will pass over you. So we find that it is through the blood that we are forgiven. It is through the blood that we must come through in order to be set free from the captivity of sin. Blood, only through the blood. Only through the blood. And now this blood will have to be applied to the doorposts of our hearts. Stay tuned for Grace Explained Part 6. This is Sister Jenkins with Daily Fresh Manna. Remember, subscribe if you enjoyed this message. And God bless you and keep you. May his face smile upon you and give you peace. God bless you. Fresh Manna Ministries.